This is the Youth Soccer Revolution Podcast, episode number 13. Hey, thanks again for joining us for the Youth Soccer Revolution Podcast, episode number 13. Got a great show for you guys today, a really interesting interview with Martin Blanc. But before we get into our guest, I want to first thank someone who left a review on iTunes for the podcast. Sud Fiesta 86 says, hey, great podcast for aspiring coach. I'm a new coach looking to grow into the profession. This is a great podcast to learn about youth soccer in America. I have enjoyed each podcast I have listened to so far. Keep up the great work. Hey, thank you very much for that. We really appreciate all the feedback we receive, and I can't thank you guys enough for tuning in and listening and providing feedback to me so that I can improve the content. I know I've had a great time bringing guests to you guys and discussing player development and soccer with them, so I hope you guys are enjoying the podcast as well, and we're going to continue putting up great content for you. My guest today is a good friend of mine by the name of Martin Blanc. And Martin has a special story for us, actually several. Martin has a unique perspective on player development here in the United States. Martin grew up in Argentina until the age of 13 when he moved with his parents to the United States. I was really glad that he came on because he brought with him a lot of great, interesting stories about his experience growing up in Argentina and then how he adjusted to playing here in the United States. As you'll listen, he'll talk about how he had never played 11-on-11, and he was already 14 years old when he arrived here, which was pretty interesting. He also takes us inside the Argentine culture and describes just how big soccer is in Argentina, specifically in Buenos Aires, where he's from, and then gets us deep into how kids grow up playing soccer there and what other forms of soccer there are, what the kids use to play even if they don't have a ball. But I mean, just really interesting and great stories about his experiences there. I want to thank Martin again for coming on and taking the time. I know he's busy with coaching and his job, and just really glad to get a chance to almost relive some of those experiences with him. So again, I hope you enjoy the interview. We dive right in. Again, Martin grew up in Argentina, moved to the United States when he was around 13, 14 years old, and he attended the Kalamazoo College in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Welcome back to the Youth Soccer Revolution podcast. Today we have the pleasure to speak to Martin Blanc. Martin, you played at Kalamazoo College.
Yeah, that's right. I was there from 2008 until 4 seasons there playing, and then I did a season as an assistant coach as well the year afterward.
Martin Blanc, he's going to tell us a little bit more about himself so we can get to know him better, and then we'll go on with a little bit more of a soccer journey and what he went through.
Sure. Hey, everybody. So, again, Martin is my name. I was born in Argentina, so soccer has always been a huge part of my life. I was born there back in 1990, and I moved to Michigan when I was 13 years old. So I grew up in Argentina. We moved here because of my parents, so I actually I did high school in Ann Arbor. So I lived there for about 5 years, and then I did about 5 years living in Kalamazoo while I played soccer there and went to school, went to college there, studied business, and now I actually live out in St. Joe, Michigan. And I work in finance, but soccer coach as well. I've been coaching the sport for maybe 10 years now, and I've been playing my whole life.
So you talked about being born in Argentina, and I mean, to anyone that knows soccer, when they think Argentina, they think of some of the greatest players of all time. So tell us a little bit more about your upbringing there. And obviously you said you were born there. Where were you born? What was the soccer culture and environment there like?
Sure. So I was born in Buenos Aires. Buenos Aires is not only a huge, huge city. I mean, we're talking 12 to 14 million people, but it's also the home of the majority of the top clubs of the Argentine First Division. A lot of top players come out of there, and there's just so many people. Soccer is just a huge part of the culture. So I grew up actually playing with my friends in the street and in what we call papi football. Papi football is 5v5 soccer. It's kind of like futsal, but it's actually played on turf. And I grew up playing on the old school turf, which was really short and was full of sand. We don't have a lot of the rubber turf anymore. So I grew up playing on that, and I grew up playing a lot in the parks. My friends and I would get together to play all the time, and then I grew up playing as well in my backyard. I remember, some of my biggest influences growing up were soccer players, and I would imitate them in my backyard all of the time. So I would kick the ball around all day up against the wall, drive my grandparents nuts. But I would pretend I was Aymar, and I would pretend I was Saviola, and I would pretend I was all of the River Plate players at the time because I grew up a River Plate fan. My family was too, so, River Plate is a big part of my life as it relates to soccer. It was always my dream to play there. And I actually had the opportunity to when I was a teenager. So in Argentina, the way it's structured is extremely different from the U.S. So I grew up playing in little, with my friends out in the street or out in the park, and we had a little neighborhood league that we played in. Unlike here, where you have a ton of youth travel clubs, there you have a team that you make with your friends from school, and you play against other random kids from throughout the city. And there's tons of these little, it's almost like a soccer zone, but there's one every 10 blocks, you see one. And so there's all these leagues in each one. So there's hundreds and hundreds and thousands of kids playing. And that's how you play, unless you are a very, very special talent, and then you're actually playing in the youth academy of one of the professional teams. So people who
Martin,
yeah, go ahead.
I don't mean to cut you off, but let's dive a little deeper into that. So tell us a little bit more about that. What is it exactly? Because I've never heard of it.
Sure. So papi football is what we call futsal in Argentina. We also call it fútbol cinco. And what it means, fútbol cinco, what it means is football in five, right? So that's because it's 5 players a side, just like in futsal. It's a small field. It's got all of the lines, and you're playing 5 against 5, 4 field players and a goalkeeper. And what you actually see in papi football is a very, very different style than anything I've seen here in the U.S. And it's a style that is extremely skill-based. So it requires a ton of technical ability of players, and that's why a lot of the players that come out of Argentina are very technically gifted. They have excellent ball control skills, and it's because they're used to playing in these small fields, these tight spaces, and they're used to, doing different types of combinations and dribbling out of trouble when they're, surrounded by players in the small field. And so the type of game requires skill to be very high for somebody to succeed there. And that's kind of what my upbringing was. So actually, when I came to the U.S., it wasn't until the age of 14 that I played my first full field game. I had never really played on a field that big before, ever. And
and that was here, you said?
Yeah, that was in the U.S. And so it was a very difficult adjustment for me going from that style where I was actually a very good player, and then I came here, and all of a sudden I wasn't that much of a good player because it was a big type of adjustment to go to such a big field to a different style of play that was more fast-paced, it was more physical, and the technical skill that I had developed was not as effective here because of it. And that's what's very different about the players down there.
Yeah. Martin,
yeah, go ahead.
Futsal in the United States is growing. One of the issues that I know that I have when I talk to parents about futsal and other players and coaches, what the transition is from going to futsal to going and playing. Are you saying you had a difficult time because of the way that soccer is played here outdoor, or because you had never played outdoor before?
I think it's a little bit of both, to be honest. I think one thing is the style of play here is very different. and that was hard to adjust to because I was the type of player who was a good player down in Argentina when I was playing in these leagues, in these neighborhood leagues, and when I came up here, all of a sudden I had something different. You could tell that my style, I brought something different to the game, but it was not necessarily what the game required of me. So I think the difficult adjustment was for me to understand, how do I become more effective in this different type of game, and then how do I merge the two styles to still have an impact while playing this different type of soccer.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, I understand. So what you're saying is that time that you spent on those small fields still made you the player you are today. Which I mean, I've played against you. I've seen you play before, and obviously you're an awesome number 10 player out there.
Thank you. And yeah, honestly, that's exactly what I'm saying. So basically, what it's done, it's giving me. I like to think about this in kind of all aspects of life, right? So I developed a certain skill set when I was growing up that a lot of people here don't. There's just not as much of an opportunity to develop it. And then I came here, and I sort of had the benefit of then developing the style of soccer that goes on here. And what I've gotten to do is, as I've grown as a player, merge the two styles into sort of the way I play today. And I'm not saying I'm unique in any sort of way. There's tons of players that play like me. But I have had the benefit of, because I've had the two very different experiences, I've sort of developed a new style for myself that's been very effective for me, because I've continued the technical ability that I've developed from futsal and from Papi Futbol, and I've started applying it at the full scale, full field 11v11 level, where you just don't see it as much. Yeah. But we're starting to see it, like you said, we're starting to see it a lot more.
I'll say it for you, Martin. You are a very unique player. I mean, even some of the guys that play with me when we first played against you, and that when you played with me, we obviously noticed right away you're a lefty. You're a true number 10. You have vision. You can shoot. You can dribble. So I mean, you are a unique player. So knowing your background, that where you come from, people immediately assume, he must be from Argentina. There's no way he can be from the U.S. So, I mean, you are a very unique player. So, I mean, that should be said. But let's go back, because, I mean, our podcast is all about learning from your experience and your journey. And, I mean, you have, again, another unique journey that you went through. I mean, you're from Argentina. You were born there. And then you started playing this Papi Futbol, which, I mean, I'm involved with soccer, and I'm Latin American, and I had never heard about this before. So tell me more about that. How did it get started? I mean, how old were you? I mean, tell me more about that.
Going off of, my upbringing as a soccer player, I grew up a lot. I think what I benefited from is I have 3 cousins that are 4 to 7 years older than me, and and my dad as well. So I grew up playing a lot with them. I mean, a ton with those, with my 3 cousins and their friends. And I grew up a lot playing with my dad, just in the backyard or out in the park. But when I played with my cousins, the benefit I got was that I was always playing with older players who were bigger, who were stronger, who were faster. And so I, again, had to rely on developing a technical skill, because I couldn't beat a player with speed. I couldn't beat a player with strength. So I had to develop a technical skill. And that's a lot, again, of what I got out of Papi Futbol is how I developed those skills. And honestly, Ernesto, what we did a lot of was play. Man, I'll tell you about my soccer as a child. I see kids here, and they truly are privileged. That's something that I see here that you just don't see in Argentina. I remember growing up, one of my favorite gifts ever was a soccer ball. I had a soccer ball growing up, and I think I had one ball for many, many, many years. And I had that ball until it was nothing but bladder. All of the outside had been torn out of it from playing in the street, from playing every day in my backyard. And I didn't get another one until it popped. It broke, or again, it was my birthday, right? So to us in Argentina, they say that a lot in you hear it sometimes when you hear interviews of players from other countries, how, you know, your ball is your best friend or things like that. And honestly, I don't know that I would say that my ball was my best friend, but I would say my soccer ball was, man, one of my most prized possessions. And it's because I loved playing soccer. I mean, all of the time, anywhere with any of my friends. And my ball was my ball. And if I lost it, I broke it, I may not get another one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big part of it too. And when I would play with my friends actually at school, we weren't allowed to have a soccer ball. We weren't allowed to bring one for recess. We didn't have anything like that. And during gym class, we were not allowed to play soccer either. And
Wow.
what we actually would do at recess is we would bring, we weren't allowed to have pop cans, but we had juice boxes. And so we would actually step on juice boxes and flatten them out, and we'd play with that. And literally every single recess, every single day, we played that. We played soccer with a just smushed down juice box, and we played 4 against 4, 5 against 5, any spot around in the patio of our school. We would play that because it was a tiled patio. It was outdoors, and that's where we had recess, and that's how I grew up playing too. You know, at school.
So you'd plan it out, and you would make it into like something that looked like a ball, or just completely flat like a disc?
It was actually completely flat, so you had to step on it, or you could kick it. I mean, you could kick it and it would kind of glide down the patio, but you had to kick it or you could step on it. So you can imagine, you know, one kid steps on it, you got eight-year-olds running at you, you're stepping on it, everybody's kicking at you, and all you're trying to do is step on it and like put it through somebody's legs, or somehow, you know, dribble out of pressure, out of three guys that are defending you, and find one of your teammates. So, you know, as you can imagine, again, right, we were just having fun at the time. I didn't even realize some of the skills I was developing that would, you know, later help me out.
Like so much, I mean, I'm sure it improved the quickness of your feet, you know, trying to move that little flat, I guess, piece of garbage around.
Yeah, definitely. And I, you know, even later I remember we would do that. You know what would actually work well is a plastic bottle. When you step on a plastic bottle and smush it down, it's actually got a little bit of weight to it too. So we could play with that, and we'd actually juggle those things too. You'd juggle an empty water bottle and see how many juggles you could get.
Wow.
Whereas, man, if we found a tennis ball, that was amazing, right? But we weren't really allowed to have those there either. But those were fun to play with too. So I grew up playing, when I didn't have a soccer ball, I played with a tennis ball because I actually grew up playing a little bit of tennis too. So I grew up juggling a tennis ball, dribbling a tennis ball, treating it just like a soccer ball. And all those things helped me develop my touch and, you know, develop some of those skills.
Again, the Papi football, you mentioned about, you know, there's a lot of clubs here, and there's travel soccer, and there's recreational soccer. But over there, you said you kind of get together with some friends in your neighborhood, and then you make a team and you go play in a league. How did you get started in your first league? How old were you, and how did you start it up?
I think I want to say I was 9 years old the first time I joined an actual team in an actual league. And what it is, like I said, there's tons of these facilities all over the city. And eventually one of my friends said, you know, he got a group of us together. We all play soccer, right? So he got a group of us together, and he said, hey, we should actually form a team and play at this little field that they've got, this little facility. It was about 4 or 5 blocks from our school, so everybody lived sort of nearby, and it was Saturday mornings. And I remember we'd want to play there because we played there all the time, actually. When I was in Argentina, and actually the big reason of why we moved here was there was a lot of political unrest, and there were a lot of strikes at the school. So there were days where we would show up to school and find out we wouldn't have class that day. So what we'd all do is we'd go over to, we'd say, all right, we're going to go play soccer. And we'd go over to this facility that was about 4 blocks away, which is a Papi football place. And everybody would pay $2, and we would get the field for an unlimited time until a group showed up who had actually reserved it. So we would actually go play Papi football from 8 a.m., which is when we would have started school, until sometimes 4 p.m. I mean, that We played all morning. We'd eat lunch there, and then we'd play all afternoon until we got kicked off.
Wow.
And that's what we did. Every time there was a strike at the school, and let me tell you, the last couple of years I was in Argentina, that was very often. We would do that, and we would play all day long. And one day my friend said, hey, we should sign up for the league here. So I actually still have, the league used to have a guy who was doing sort of a magazine for them, and he would, they had a group of kids who would actually watch every game and then write comments and a summary of the game and comment on the plays. I actually still have a lot of those saved because it has ratings of all of us and all my teammates, and it's got pictures of our teams and all that, which is pretty cool. But
yeah,
that's how
awesome.
we got into it. And that's how we ended up deciding to sign up. And every year we would play through a season, and then we'd refine the team a little bit. Soccer is very cutthroat there. So if you're not good enough, people tell you you're not good enough. Unlike here, everybody gets a medal, everybody plays. There, if you weren't good enough, you just were not going to get that much playing time. And come next season, you were probably getting kicked off the team by all your teammates. And there were not many hard feelings, to be honest. It's just kind of the way it is. And so that way we kept refining our team, and we actually went from doing very poorly in the league to the last couple of years becoming very close to winning the league. And we had a very good team by the end of it. But that's essentially how we got into it. So I played from about 9 years old until I moved to the U.S. on that team with a lot of my friends from school.
When you guys decided to get this team together, it sounds like it was just your friends that decided, hey, we're going to get the team together. Martin, you want to come play with us. What about parent involvement? What type of adult involvement was there? Was there a coach, a parent?
Yeah, there was. Actually, we were required to have a coach. I think at first it might have been somebody's older brother. After that, it was somebody's parent, and at one point it was my dad. My dad was coach for, I want to say, about a year probably, and he was one of the many coaches that we had. But basically what it was is we needed somebody to sort of sign off on everything for the team. The coach did make the subs and did talk to us and taught us a little bit about how to play, but a lot of it we knew each other and we played together so often that there wasn't too much coaching needed either. But we always had somebody there coaching us, and it was also to worry about the subs to see who would get more playing time and those sorts of things.
Yeah. So how expensive was this?
Oh, that's the funny part. That was a big shock as well coming to the U.S. It was unbelievable to us. I'll start with the U.S. piece because we moved here, and I remember we were told that for me to play soccer on Ann Arbor Arsenal, which no longer exists, but at the time was their A team was an MRL, so Midwest Regional League club, which is where I ended up playing. That was about $1,200 for a year.
Wow.
And in Argentina, one of those seasons, which you would play, I think 3 seasons a year, was $8 to sign up per person.
Wow.
Or 8 pesos.
Per season or each session?
Yeah, total to sign up for the whole season. And then every game, your team collectively had to bring 25 pesos, which was at the time the equivalent of $25. So if you think about it, you've got, I want to say, let's say, somewhere between 8 and 10 players. So every game we would pay maybe $5, probably less than that, probably about $3 to $4 a person. And that was it. I mean, we ended up paying, I think by the end of the season, we'd pay probably like $30 total, $40 total each kid.
Yeah, it sounds like you've done the math before already.
Yeah, so imagine going from paying $100 to $200 a year to playing these leagues that were, competitive. They required a lot of skill. You're playing against good players, and then coming here and having to pay $1,200 just to get on a competitive travel team.
Yeah, it's a big change. When they talk about coaching, you mentioned, my dad kind of jumped in once. Different parents kind of jumped in. I mean, what type of coaching did you receive?
I'll be honest with you, Ernesto. I don't think too much coaching was required, and that's another huge difference between growing up in Argentina and soccer in the U.S. I watch soccer, and I have watched soccer throughout my life almost every day. I mean, I think there was a weekend, I remember at work we were talking about what we did over the weekend, and there was one weekend, I think last month, that I literally watched soccer from 8 a.m., because now they show the EPL games and they show some of the Spanish games, so I watched soccer from 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. and took a break to go to the gym and took a break to go eat lunch. But I watched, 6 to 8 hours of soccer that day. If you think about how much soccer I watched by the time I was 15 years old, you're probably just accounting for way more hours of watching soccer than a lot of adults who are in the soccer world here in the U.S. And that's not me. That's everybody down there. So every time there's a game, I'm texting my cousins in Argentina, texting my friends in Argentina, hey, are you watching this? Hey, did you see the play? Did you see that goal? I mean, everybody's watching all the time. So you're learning a ton about the game on your own just by watching. And then my dad is actually the person who taught me so much about soccer because we'd watched games together since I was very, very little. He took me to the stadium for the first time when I was 4 years old. And he's always coached me and pointed things out for me that I would have never known, right? And that's kind of how I learned to play and how I learned the tactical side of the game. So by the time we were 10 years old and playing in a futsal league, we knew how to move around the field. We knew how to defend. We understood the tactics of the game. So it was very, very easy. It didn't require much coaching, which is what's so different here. Here, sometimes at 10 years old, you're still teaching a kid how to trap a ball and how to, properly make a pass. Whereas we learned that when we were 3 or 4, and by 10, we understand the full tactics of the game. By 15, we certainly know the full tactics of the game, and we can execute them, right? And I think that's a big, big disconnect between the two soccer cultures.
You mentioned earlier about in soccer in Argentina being very cutthroat, and then you mentioned, some of the very skilled players are already in academies. Can you tell us a little bit more about your understanding of the academy system over in Argentina? Because I know there's professional teams that take young players, right, as young kids.
Yeah, exactly. So to play professionally in Argentina, I would say 90% of players, if not 99% of players, have to start through a professional youth academy. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is that each team, so let's take the two top clubs of Argentina, River Plate and Boca Juniors. And this goes, by the way, for every professional club, pretty much at every level throughout all of the professional divisions. Every team has a youth academy. So if you want to play at the River Plate top flight, it's the River Plate first team, then there's a reserve, and then they have what's called the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th division. And then they've got what's called like youth or something of that nature, and you've got the different ages in the youth. So the youth academy is everywhere from the 4th division down to the 9th division. Then the reserve squad is the tier below the first team, and then the first team is the actual professional team that you would see on TV. Now the 4th through 9th division, each one is a different age group. So when you start through the youth academy, you start at the 9th division, and then the following year you'd move up to the 8th, and then the 7th, and so on and so forth, until someday you would hope to make it into the reserve team, and then to the professional team. And so you want to get into a club at a very young age because if you think about it, and even, like I said, there's a youth tier below that, and those are kids that are 13 years and younger. So if you think about it, if a kid joins a professional coaching staff, right, at age 8 or 9, and he's been developed by that level and playing against kids at that level, by the time you're 14, if you haven't played on those clubs, you have very, very little chance of making it into one of the clubs because you're trying out against kids who have been coached by professionals for, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. There's kids who get into those clubs as young as 7 or 8 years old. And that's what's so different.
Yeah, and so what about you? I mean, you're a very good player. I mean, again, I've I've met and played with players that have played professionally, a lot of college players, and you stand out. I mean, you're a very good player. Did you ever think about that? Was that ever a path you guys wanted to take?
Yeah, it was. It was my dream, actually. Every year since I think I was 5 years old, which is when I started taking not private lessons, but I guess they were private lessons. But I was part of I was coached by somebody in a small group. They were small group sessions when I was 5 years old, and so ever since I was 5 years old, I had told my dad that I wanted, as a gift, for him to allow me to go try out at the Riverfront Youth Academy. And I never got that gift. A big part of it was that my parents just didn't want soccer to be my life. I come from a very academic family, and they wanted me to make sure I focused on school, and they didn't want me to get my hopes up and my dreams up for something that is so difficult to achieve. So actually, when I was 12 years old, I finally was able to convince both of my parents to let me go try out. And I tried out at a club called Argentinos Juniors. It's actually a first-tier club. They're in the first division. And that's actually where Maradona came out of that youth academy, Cambias came out of that youth academy.
Yep.
There's a lot of very famous players that came out of that academy. And it was close enough to my house that I would want to go, and actually two of my friends from school were going, so the three of us kind of made the trip out together. My dad came with us, and we wanted to go try out and see how it went. And this was, again, when I was 12 years old, and I made the team. I went there, I tried out, I made the team, and I'll tell you what, they took about 40 kids that day, so it's not like it was one 18-club team or 18-player team that was extremely hard to get into, but I knew the difficult part would be getting any sort of playing time. And like I said, soccer was very cutthroat, right? So they were happy to take kids at that age, but for you to actually play, it was going to be very, very difficult. And I actually had a really, really tough time during my tryout because it was an environment that was even more foreign to me because it was even more cutthroat than what I was used to. And some of the kids, the majority of the kids I was playing with were coming in from the slums and really had nothing else other than soccer. And it was very evident. I came from a middle-class family, and those kids, you could tell they judged me differently because of where I was coming from. And on the field, they wouldn't pass me the ball. And nobody would talk to me, actually. And it wasn't just me. It was a few people that were kind of like me, but nobody would want to talk to you. Nobody wanted to pass you the ball. So it was very difficult to, first of all, to have fun because I was 12 years old. And second of all, to play much and showcase much of what I could do on the field. But I toughed it out and I finished the whole session, and it went okay, but I remember there was I think I'll never forget, there was a very specific play where the field was all dirt, right? So everywhere, even these clubs, these professional clubs where you grow up playing, it's all dirt because people play on the grass so much that it dies. So it's very bumpy, it's very dry, it's dirt. So you have to have good control because the ball is bouncing all over the place. And somebody passed me the ball, and there was a huge bump on the field, and it bounced not only over my foot, but over my knee. And the kid that passed me the ball yelled at me. I mean, I've never been yelled at that hard when I was 12 years old because I didn't control a ball that bounced over my knee when it was a pass that was coming to me on the ground. So after that, again, they did not want to pass me the ball just because I lost it that one time. So I actually...
That was during the tryout.
And that was during the tryout, yep. So I actually just didn't enjoy it. It wasn't as fun as it was playing with my friends because when I played with my friends, we were tough on each other, but we were always playing, we were having fun. And for this, it was like these kids almost saw it as if new kids come into the club, then I have less of an opportunity to make it. So I'm going to treat every new kid like crap because I don't want them to take my spot. Right? So I actually told my dad that I didn't enjoy it, and I didn't go back.
Mm-hmm.
And then very, very shortly after, we moved to the U.S. So even if I had wanted to go back, I would have only had a few weeks, if not a month or two, to keep training there before moving to the U.S. So I didn't lose too much, but that was my experience at that age with the youth academy. And then I actually had another experience in my teenage years as well at River Plate.
Do you want to talk about that? Or I wanted to cut in real quick and just you mentioned about coming from a middle class and I want to make sure that listeners understand this because when I was watching a video about Brazilian soccer, this kid was talking about when I get on the field, the poorer kids kind of look, they don't want to pass me the ball. They don't think I can play because I'm white, and so he talked about that. So I can see, I mean, when you say, hey, they knew I was from the middle class and they kind of, they didn't want to, play with me.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that the listeners understand that yes, that does happen there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, all the time. And it's not just the middle class, right? It's also because this was a professional youth academy, and these kids who come from the slums, in their mindset, it's if I don't make it here or at another club, I may never get out of my situation. This is my chance to save my family of the situation we live in today. And if somebody new comes in, then they might take that opportunity. So that's a big reason for them. They didn't want to pass me the ball. They didn't want to be my friend. They didn't want to play with me. None of that. Yeah,
and maybe that's even more of a reason why they want to get in there as quickly as possible, as young as possible.
Yep.
Okay, so why don't you tell us can you tell us a little bit more about your River Plate experience? Because that's your dream club right there.
Yeah, I mean, and I will say to an extent, I can almost say I got to a little bit taste my dream. And what happened is I had been living in Ann Arbor, Michigan for about 3 years at this time, and my dad met a guy who happened to be River Plate's got affiliations all over the world, and it's little clubs that represent River Plate. And there was actually one in Detroit. And my dad ended up running into and meeting the president of this club. And the president of this club had ties and connections to the professional River Plate club because it was an officially affiliated institution here in Detroit. So after, talking to my dad, talking to him for a while, he always wanted me to go out and play with their team in Detroit. And I did. I played for the Detroit affiliate in several games in the league. And then what ended up happening is that he saw me play, and he really liked the way I played. And he was actually planning a trip to take some of the best players from his club down to Argentina to train with the professional youth academy. And that's how I got to go. I got to go for a summer when I was 15 for 3 months. As soon as school ended, I left. I got on the plane with a group of guys to go to River Plate, go to Argentina, and I trained just about every single day with the youth academy down there. And I can now say, because it was less than a month ago, the Argentine national team had a friendly match, and there's a new coach now that the World Cup ended, and there's a new generation of players that's about to go through the national team. And there's two guys, one that's at Villarreal and one that's at Juventus, that I played with that year when I was at River Plate. Nice. And that to me, I think, I just can't believe that I was on the same pitch as some of those guys who, I remember one of them, he had scored an amazing goal. He was 15 years old, and he scored a goal from 45 yards out, put it into the top corner. And I was amazed by the fact that he had done that on that field, in that environment. I couldn't believe it. And you see why, and you see where he is now, and it makes sense.
And I guess we can get into, what you're doing today. Obviously you went to K College after high school.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I got to play at K College for 4 years. I actually missed out my freshman season. I barely got to play because I had a bad knee injury. That was a nagging, lingering knee injury that affected me as a tendonitis. And then I actually started playing again midway into the season. And my second game back, I got a broken nose from going up for a header I got elbowed in the face and broke my nose, and so I missed the rest of the season. But then I got to play a lot sophomore through senior year, which was a great experience. I mean, it was definitely my favorite experience in college.
So, Martin, did you get any offers from bigger schools, like Division I schools, or was it that you wanted to go to K College? Because you could play Division I. Yeah,
I'll talk a little bit about the system, and I'll give a little bit of advice because this is something I wish I would have known.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
please. Of course. So I think the biggest issue I had is I didn't start early enough, because I was like I said earlier, on a team that traveled and played in the Midwest Regional League. So we played in some of the biggest showcases around the country, and we had a good team. We really did. We had a very competitive team, and I think we were in the second tier of that league. But we had tons of Division I coaches at our games at most of those college showcases. So we did get contacted by several schools, but nobody. I at the time I had my heart set on playing at a big D1 school. I really wanted to play in like a Big Ten school for University of Michigan or something of that nature. And I went to a camp out in Northwestern as well, and I did a college recruiting camp in Northwestern, and I was heavily recruited by another Division III school, but they were at the time top 10 in the nation, and they wanted me to go there. But I didn't know much about the school. I didn't do enough research. I think that was my big downfall, was I didn't do enough research. And then when I started contacting some of the bigger schools, it was too late. I mean, by that point, I was midway through my junior year, and they had those classes fully booked, what's the word I'm looking for? They had already recruited everybody for those classes. Now, the other thing is, I was just not that big of a name when I was growing up. I mean, when I was in high school, I played on both a club and a high school that had extremely good players. I mean, I'm talking about a lot of top quality players. Some of my friends have gone on to play professionally in England and Canada, and elsewhere. And so I was not a name that stood out. When people came to watch my high school, they came to watch other players. They weren't necessarily watching me. And I think that was also more difficult, but it was also because those players were better than me. That was a big part of it as well. And so the combination, I think, of not having a name for myself, a big enough name for myself in the soccer community outside of Ann Arbor, and then not starting the recruiting process early enough, made it very difficult for me to get recruited by any of the big schools that I wanted. By the time I realized it was just too late, far too late. And then I heard a lot of my friends from my club team were looking into Kalamazoo College. And I said, well, hey, why don't I just call the coach, see what's going on there, see what their situation is. I have some friends going there, so I know I'll at least get to have a lot of fun, and I'll get to play college soccer, and I'll get a great education because Kalamazoo College is a top academic school. So my parents were going to be very happy about that. So I called the coach, had a few phone calls with him, and he really wanted me to go play there. Chris Adrian was the coach at the time. And his roots are Bolivian. So I think the South American connection was something that he was looking forward to. And we talked a few times, and eventually, I went out there, and I got a good deal to go there to Kalamazoo College and study, get a great education, and play soccer at the college level. And two of my good friends, who are now two of my best friends, got to go there and play with me. So definitely an experience that I enjoyed and that I really liked. Sometimes do I wish I had played at a higher level? Yeah, I do. But do I regret playing where I played? No, because I had a ton of fun and I got to make an impact, because by the time I was a sophomore, I could make an impact on that team. And I had somewhat of a leadership role, definitely by my junior year, just because, again, right, I was a bit of a different player, and I got along with my teammates really well. So So I got to have that unique experience, which was great.
Yeah, and I think because of the recruiting process and because of stuff like this that happens for the collegiate level, I've heard people talk about how not all the best players always play in Division I. There's always good talent in all first division, second division, junior college. You can always find good players.
Yeah, definitely. I know, for example, of some very, very good NAIA schools. I remember I had two of my friends, they were excellent players, and they went and played at Schoolcraft College. And Schoolcraft College not only had them, but they brought in several boys from England. And it's because NAIA, they're allowed to recruit that way, and they're allowed to bring kids in. There's less strict rules about recruiting and about scholarships and those sorts of things. So some of those teams were extremely competitive. And some of those teams have older guys who are, 27, 28 years old in college because they wanted to come to the U.S. for the experience. And those guys have a ton of experience playing, and it really shows on the field. So it's really not all about D1. D1 is the one that gets a lot of the lights, but there's always tons of great players in all the other schools and other divisions. And I think one of the big flaws of the system is that Division 1, 2, and 3 is split out by the size of the school, right? So the biggest schools automatically are D1. It doesn't mean they're the best schools, and that's what people fail to realize, right? It just means they're the biggest school with the biggest budgets, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best school. So a lot of the times what you have is people who are looking for this small school experience, who are maybe looking for a school like Kalamazoo College, which is excellent academic school, but still want to compete at a high level. And so they go to those smaller schools because they know they can get that experience. And that's just so independent of whether you are a top school soccer-wise or not. It's different, right? It's not about the best schools playing in the first division. It's about the size of the school. I will say, so there's a couple pieces of advice that I got and that I hear over and over again, soccer players and non-soccer players, that I would say are essential whether you do it in soccer or not. The first one is hard work is the most important thing. Some of those players are naturally gifted, but had they not worked as hard as they did, they would have never become professionals. I just read an interview by Thierry Henry, and he talked about how he worked so hard because growing up he wasn't the best player, but he had to outwork other players. And that's what Lumumba Sabas, he's the current Kalamazoo College head coach, that's what he's always told me as well. And he's had experience playing all over the world professionally as well. So the first part is hard work. The second part that I want to talk about is a piece of advice that I've received from a few people. You should continue to pursue soccer as a professional career as long as the hard work comes very easy and natural. As long as that's what you want to do. If you wake up one day and you say, oh, I got to go train, or oh, I have a game, or oh, I have practice, then it's probably not the right thing. Or your heart is probably just not in it anymore the way maybe it used to be. Growing up, I was always a kid who absolutely hated when there was a thunderstorm and my practice got canceled. Because I wanted to play. I didn't care what the weather was like. I just wanted to go out and play. I have, ran out. I used to bike to the field, and I've biked in snow and rain just to go play. And that's because I love playing, and I love what I do, and that's why I do it. And so those two pieces of advice have been essential.
So what would you recommend then to a high school kid that is maybe thinking one day playing professional? What do you think about the high school process compared to the turning pro process, where some of the kids end up going to Europe or South America to play?
Sure. So let me give a few pieces of advice for those guys who are trying to make it or who do think they want to.
Okay.
Number one is study the game. Watch it, study it. One of the biggest things that I learned to do early is when I was on the bench and I knew I was going to go on, let's say, at left mid, I was always studying who the right back is, how he likes to play, because I was going to be going up against that player. So I'm learning about my opponents when I play. I'm learning about my opponents when I'm on the bench. Then when I'm home, I love to watch and I love to study the game. And so I'll watch videos. I'll learn about my position. I'll learn about other positions. One of the biggest things and opportunities out there is that you have to learn to adjust. So you have to know a lot about the game to adjust to different situations. So I'd say for those kids who really, really want to take the game to the next level, they have to really study the game. They have to know about every position, every formation. They have to understand how to move tactically and how to play technically as well. And then the other thing is, again, right, going back to what I said earlier, is it's got to be in your heart. You have to make sure that every day you wake up loving the fact that you're about to play soccer. Because if it gets to the point where you over and over again are complaining about going to practice, or you don't like to go to practice on certain days because you have better things to do, then it's probably not the right thing for you at that next level. I can say one more thing too.
Go for it.
One thing that I learned a lot about recently, and by recently I mean in the last 5 or 6 years, that I had to go out and learn for myself. Because, like I said, my father's taught me a ton about the game, but my parents never pushed me to play. They never pushed me to train, so it was always up to me, which takes me back to the love of the game, right? It was always up to me to play as much as I did and learn as much as I did and improve as much as I did. But what I did learn about over the last few years that I learned from others was the importance of the physical aspect of the game and the health aspect of the game. So from a nutritional standpoint to a training and working out and physical standpoint as well. So that was something that I knew nothing about growing up in Argentina. We just didn't learn those types of things. We didn't work out, weight lift, those sorts of things that a lot of kids do here at an even earlier age. I just had never even seen or done in Argentina. And it's something my parents didn't know much about either. So that's one thing that I really had to study and learn about, how to work out for soccer to compete at a very high physical level. So that's one thing that I would say for those of you in high school, it's a very, very good time to start learning about those things, because it's when you need to start developing your muscles to compete at a higher level, and you need to start learning about how to do that properly. And it will certainly help with preventing injuries. I talked a little bit about how I missed my entire freshman season of college, and it was 100% because I lacked strength in my legs, and I developed an injury over time that caused me to miss almost 6 months of soccer. And it's simply because of, I'll say, ignorance, because that's the best word for it. I just didn't know how to best prepare my body to play as much as I was playing. And eventually I hit an age where I could no longer do that.
Yeah, that's great advice. And so, Martin, we want to, I know I've taken up a lot of your time today already, and we want to move to the last part of our interview. We normally ask our guests to learn from their journey, learn from their experience, and we like to ask them, if you had a 5-year-old son today, or if you were 5 years old today, living in the United States, how would you go about getting into soccer again? What do you think would be the best way to get into soccer and start developing and maximize that development?
Sure. I think that honestly the number one thing is fun. I mean, as long as the kid is having fun, then you're on the right track. I always had fun when it came to soccer. I remember some of my earliest memories are me watching soccer with my dad, watching soccer with my cousins, with my uncles, watching soccer with my family, either on TV or playing. So one of the biggest things is I used to always bother my dad or my grandpa or my mom whenever they come home from work, and I'd say, let's play, let's kick the ball around. So it was something innate, but at the same time, it was them, right? Whenever I got a lot of joy out of playing with them. So there's actually a family video I have of me when I was 4 or 5 years old kicking the ball with my grandpa, and I was having a ton of fun. And my grandpa, he couldn't do much. He could just kick the ball back to me, but just spending time with my parents, spending time with my grandparents, with my brother. My brother and I grew up playing a lot together. And so that was the main thing. I mean, at that age, fun is the absolute number one thing. And I'm actually a coach now, so I coach a travel club called Jair, and I coach several different age groups at that level. And the number one thing I always tell my players is, let's make sure that we're having fun, because at the end of the day, that's why you play the sport, right? It is a game. Soccer is a game. I'll tell you it's much more than that. Anyone will tell you it's much more than that, because it is. But in its roots, it's a game. And if you forget that fact and you forget to have fun with it, then it loses its purpose.
Yeah.
And so that's the number one thing for kids.
Yeah. And for parents to know that, it's about having fun when they're that young, because parents will come up to me and say, I don't want him to fall behind, and he's 5 or 6, and I'm like, just make sure he has fun. That's the most important thing. I mean,
exactly.
Then once the hard work comes around, it's just a game to him that he loves anyway, so it won't be hard work.
Exactly. So, and that takes me back, right, to my original point is, growing up, my parents never, ever pushed me. Actually, they pushed me away from soccer because, like I said, they were academics, and they did not want me to take soccer seriously and take it as a career if it was going to harm my studies or harm my schooling. So they would push me away from soccer, or they just would never push me to play more. It was always up to me. So I would never worry about my child falling behind, because I know that if he wants to get better, he will make the effort to get better. But I would never want to force that onto a kid. It doesn't result. I don't think it ends in good results.
Yeah, definitely agree. So Martin, and that comes to the conclusion of our interview. Is there anything else that we missed, that we didn't ask, that you think it's important for you to talk about?
No, I don't think so. I think I'm glad you asked that last question, because I would have overlooked it, and it's the most important one, right? It's the love of the game, but it's the fun that it brings. Since I know this is a lot about, youth soccer, I would say that's the number one thing for kids, is to make sure that the kids have fun playing.
Well, Martin, you're definitely given us a lot to think about, and so much knowledge and so much information about your experience in Argentina. That was just great. So we really appreciate you coming on, and we wish you luck.
All right. Thank you, Ernesto, and best of luck to you as well. And best of luck to anybody that listens to this podcast. I'm always available for any questions as well, Ernesto.
And what I'll do is I'll leave your email up on the show notes, which are on the website. Again, I just want to thank Martin one more time for coming on. Again, all this free content that we provide for you, I'm able to do it because of the guests that come on the show, and I can't thank them enough for coming on and taking their time and taking us through their journey. So I just want to remind you that if you like the show and if it's helping you out, we'd appreciate a review on iTunes, either positive or negative, whatever type of feedback you have. If you want to send me an email, Ernesto@youthsoccerevolution.com. Our website is obviously youthsoccerevolution.com. We'll have the show notes on the website as well. Martin did mention that I could give out his email. If you're interested in sending him an email or just asking him a question, any type of feedback you want to give him. Obviously, he loves soccer. He loves being around it. He loves talking about it. So just want to tell him how much you enjoyed the podcast. I'm sure he would appreciate it as well. And we'll see you on episode 14.